Daddy, I don't need the dolls. A worn-out security guard stood frozen in the toy aisle on Christmas Eve as his 6-year-old daughter wiped her tears and apologized for wanting a gift he couldn't afford. Shame burned in his chest while shoppers walked past, unaware of the quiet heartbreak unfolding beside them. From behind a display of holiday wine, the billionaire owner of the entire supermarket watched the scene in silence, then slowly stepped forward with a decision that would completely rewrite their future forever. Tell me where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe to see tomorrow's surprise. The fluorescent lights of Save Mart supermarket hummed their endless tune across aisles stocked with holiday cheer. Tinsel draped from ceiling tiles. Cardboard cutouts of smiling snowmen stood guard near pyramids of canned goods. Cheerful music drifted through speakers, promising warmth and joy to anyone with money to buy it. But Ryan Reed wasn't thinking about joy. He was thinking about survival. At 38 years old, Ryan stood at his post near the entrance, dressed in the navy blue uniform that marked him as security. The fabric was worn thin at the elbows, the collar frayed from too many washings. His name tag was slightly crooked, held on by a single pin after the other had fallen off weeks ago. He couldn't afford to replace it, so he'd learned to position it just right each morning, a small act of dignity in a job that offered little. Ryan was a tall man, broad-shouldered from years of physical work, but his posture carried a weariness that had nothing to do with his body. It was the exhaustion of a father raising a daughter alone, of a man who had watched his wife die slowly while medical bills piled up like snow in a storm that never ended. 2 years had passed since cancer had taken Lisa. 2 years since Ryan had held her hand in that hospital room and promised he would take care of their daughter no matter what. 2 years of keeping that promise while the world made it harder with every passing day. His daughter, Mia, was 6 years old now. She had her mother's eyes, dark and expressive, eyes that could light up with joy or fill with tears in an instant. She had Lisa's laugh too, that bright musical sound that used to fill their small apartment before sickness had stolen it away. Tonight was Christmas Eve, and Mia was with Mrs. Patterson, their elderly neighbor, who watched her whenever Ryan worked the night shift. He'd left her with a hug and a promise that tomorrow, Christmas Day, they would spend the whole day together. What he hadn't told her was that Christmas Day would look much like any other day. There would be no presents under a tree, because there was no tree. There would be a simple meal, nothing more. Ryan had exactly $42 in his wallet. It was meant to last until his next paycheck, which wouldn't come for another week. He'd already calculated it down to the penny. $20 for groceries tonight. $12 for the bus fare he'd need next week. $10 saved in case something broke or someone got sick, because something always broke and someone always got sick. That left $0 for Christmas presents. He'd tried to prepare Mia, speaking in the careful, gentle way he'd learned to use when explaining things children shouldn't have to understand. Santa's having a tough year, sweetheart. Lots of kids need presents, so he might not bring everything you asked for. Mia had looked at him with those eyes, Lisa's eyes, and said, "That's okay, Daddy. I just want to be with you." The memory made Ryan's chest tighten. His daughter deserved so much more than he could give her. She deserved new clothes instead of hand-me-downs from the church donation box. She deserved birthday parties with cake and candles instead of a single cupcake shared between them. She deserved a father who could afford to buy her the one thing she'd asked for this Christmas, a doll set she'd seen in the toy aisle, the kind that came with tiny furniture and accessories. She'd stood in front of that display 3 weeks ago, her small hand pressed against the plastic packaging, her eyes wide with longing. "Look, Daddy, the doll house has real lights that turn on." Ryan had checked the price tag, $59.99. It might as well have been $1,000. "That's really nice, baby," he'd said, gently steering her away. Maybe next time, but there was never going to be a next time, and they both knew it. Now standing at his post on Christmas Eve, Ryan watched families stream through the supermarket doors. Mothers with shopping carts piled high with food and gifts, fathers carrying children on their shoulders. Everyone seemed to have somewhere to go, something to celebrate, someone waiting for them at home. Ryan had Mia, and Mia had him. That was their family now. His shift supervisor, a man named Dale, who never looked Ryan in the eye, approached with his clipboard. "Reed, we need you to do a sweep of the parking lot." Some kids were setting off fireworks earlier. Make sure they're gone. Yes sir, Ryan replied, though he'd just completed a parking lot check 20 minutes ago. This was how it always went. Ryan was assigned the tasks no one else wanted. The late shifts, the holiday shifts. The jobs that kept him standing for 12 hours straight with only one 15-minute break. Dale knew Ryan couldn't complain. Jobs like this were scarce, and men with arrest records, even ones where charges had been dropped, even ones for things they didn't do, couldn't afford to make waves. Ryan had been arrested once, 10 years ago, caught in the wrong place at the wrong time when police swept through his neighborhood, looking for suspects. The charges had been dropped within 48 hours, but the arrest stayed on his record, a permanent mark that showed up on every background check. Most employers saw that arrest and stopped reading. Save Mart had been willing to take a chance on him, and for that, Ryan was grateful, even when Dale treated him like he was disposable. Convicted of nothing, suspected of everything, Lisa used to say, her voice tight with anger at the injustice of it all. But anger didn't pay bills or put food on the table. So Ryan swallowed his pride, said yes sir when he meant to say other things and kept his job. He walked through the automatic doors into the freezing December night. The parking lot stretched before him, mostly full despite the late hour. People were doing their last-minute shopping, grabbing forgotten ingredients, buying gifts they'd meant to purchase weeks ago. Ryan made his rounds, checking between cars, scanning for anything unusual. The work was mindless, which gave him too much time to think. Too much time to add up the ways he was failing his daughter. Too much time to remember Lisa's last words. Promise me you'll find joy again, Ryan. Promise me you won't just survive. Promise me you'll live. He'd made that promise, but he'd broken it. How could he find joy when every day was a battle just to keep their heads above water? How could he live when all his energy went into surviving? As Ryan completed his parking lot sweep, he noticed a black Mercedes parked near the back, away from the other cars. It was an expensive vehicle, out of place in this neighborhood. The windows were tinted, making it impossible to see inside. He approached cautiously, his training kicking in. Sometimes people used parking lots for drug deals or other activities that brought trouble. But as he got closer, he saw the car was empty. Just another wealthy person visiting a discount supermarket, probably looking for some bargain they could brag about finding. Ryan turned away, heading back inside where the warmth waited. He had 4 more hours on this shift. 4 more hours of standing and watching and pretending he didn't notice the way some customers looked at him, their eyes skimming over his uniform with dismissal, as if security guards were part of the store fixtures, rather than actual human beings. But when he walked back through those automatic doors, something caught his attention. Near the toy aisle, he saw a small figure with familiar braids, her hand reaching up toward that same doll display. His heart stopped. Mia, what was she doing here? Mrs. Patterson was supposed to be watching her. Ryan's mind raced through terrible possibilities. Had something happened? Was Mrs. Patterson hurt? He rushed toward his daughter, his security training forgotten, his carefully maintained professional demeanor cracking. Mia, baby, what are you doing here? The little girl turned, and Ryan saw she'd been crying. Tears streaked her brown cheeks, and her bottom lip trembled. I'm sorry, Daddy. I'm sorry. Mrs. Patterson appeared from the next aisle, moving as fast as her 72-year-old legs could carry her, slightly out of breath. Ryan, I'm so sorry. She woke up from a nightmare and kept saying she had to tell you something important. She was so upset, crying so hard. I thought maybe if I brought her here, just for a minute to see you were okay, she'd calm down. It's okay, Mrs. Patterson, Ryan said, though his heart was still pounding. He knelt down in front of Mia, bringing himself to her eye level. What's wrong, sweetheart? What did you need to tell me? Mia threw her arms around his neck, sobbing into his shoulder. I had a bad dream that you were sad because of me. Because I asked Santa for the dolls and you can't get them. I know Santa's having a hard year. I know you work really hard. I don't need the dolls, Daddy. I don't need anything. I just need you to know I'm not sad. I'm happy because I have you. Ryan felt something break inside his chest. He pulled his daughter close, holding her tight, breathing in the smell of her strawberry shampoo, feeling the warmth of her small body against his. This child, this perfect, beautiful child, was apologizing to him. She was 6 years old on Christmas Eve, and she was trying to make him feel better about not being able to buy her a toy. "Oh baby," he whispered, his voice cracking. "You have nothing to be sorry for, nothing at all. You're the best thing that ever happened to me. You and your mama. And I'm the luckiest daddy in the whole world to have you." They stayed like that for a long moment, father and daughter, holding each other in the middle of a discount supermarket, while shoppers moved around them. Most too busy with their own lives to notice, though a few smiled softly at the tender scene. Finally, Ryan pulled back and wiped Mia's tears with his thumb, then kissed her forehead. "How about this? Tomorrow we're going to have the best Christmas ever. Just you and me. We'll make breakfast together, and we'll watch movies, and we'll build the biggest blanket fort this world has ever seen. How does that sound?" Mia nodded, managing a smile through her tears. "Can we make pancakes? The biggest pancakes in the whole state," Ryan promised. "With faces made of chocolate chips. And can we watch the princess movie? 3 times if you want. We'll watch it so many times we'll know all the words by heart." Mia giggled, the sound like music in Ryan's ears. "I love you, Daddy." "I love you too, Mia. More than anything in this whole wide world." Mrs. Patterson stepped forward, her own eyes wet behind her glasses. "Come on, sweetheart, let's let your daddy finish his work, and we'll go home and make some hot chocolate with extra marshmallows." Mia hugged Ryan one more time, squeezing tight. "See you in the morning, Daddy. See you in the morning, baby girl." As they walked toward the exit, Mia turned back and waved. Ryan waved back, watching until they disappeared through the automatic doors into the cold night. He stood there for a moment, trying to compose himself. His eyes burned with unshed tears, his throat felt tight. He was so tired, so impossibly tired of this endless struggle, this constant fear that he was failing the one person who mattered most. Ryan turned back toward his post, trying to shake off the emotion, trying to rebuild the professional mask he wore during his shifts. But as he walked past the toy aisle, he couldn't help himself. He stopped in front of that doll display, the one Mia had been reaching for. The set was still there, pristine in its packaging. The Dream House Deluxe Edition, complete with miniature furniture, a kitchen with tiny appliances, and yes, real lights that actually worked. Mia would love it. She would spend hours creating stories, moving the dolls through their little house, building the kind of happy family life she saw in commercials but didn't have in reality. $59.99. Ryan reached out and touched the package, just like Mia had done. His reflection stared back at him from the plastic covering, a tired man in a worn uniform, a father who couldn't afford to make his daughter's Christmas wish come true. For just a moment, he allowed himself to imagine it. Walking up to the register with this box, seeing the joy on Mia's face Christmas morning, hearing her squeal of delight, watching her play for hours, her imagination bringing the tiny house to life. But $42 was all he had. And 20 of that had to go to groceries tonight, or they wouldn't have food for the next week. Ryan pulled his hand back slowly and walked away, each step feeling heavier than the last. Some things weren't meant to be, but Ryan didn't know that someone had been watching him this entire time. Someone who had seen everything, from the moment Mia appeared to the moment Ryan touched that doll package with such longing. Someone whose own heart had broken watching a father and daughter embrace in the middle of a supermarket on Christmas Eve, and that someone was about to change everything. Eleanor Hayes stood in the back corner of Save Mart, partially hidden behind a display of holiday wines, watching the scene unfold with tears streaming down her face. At 70 years old, Eleanor had thought she was beyond crying. She'd buried her husband 25 years ago after a sudden heart attack. She'd buried her only son Daniel, 5 years ago, killed by a stray bullet during a convenience store robbery while he was trying to help a frightened teenager. She'd learned to build walls around her heart, to function without feeling, to exist without truly living. But watching that security guard kneel down to comfort his crying daughter, watching him make promises he probably couldn't keep just to ease her pain, watching him stand alone at that toy display with such quiet desperation, something inside Eleanor had cracked open. She recognized that kind of love. She'd felt it herself once, before the world had taken everyone she loved away. Eleanor was not a woman who frequented discount supermarkets. As the owner of the Save Mart chain, 37 stores across 3 states, she usually sent assistants to check on operations. She lived in a penthouse overlooking the city, drove a Mercedes that cost more than most people made in a year, and spent her days in boardrooms making decisions that affected thousands of employees she'd never met. But tonight, Christmas Eve, she'd driven to this particular store on impulse. Her penthouse had felt too empty, the silence crushing in a way it hadn't been since the first Christmas after Daniel died. Her assistant had invited her to a Christmas party, one of those events where wealthy people gathered to congratulate themselves on their charity work. Eleanor had declined. What was the point of celebrating when there was no one to celebrate with? When every smile felt like a lie? So she'd come here to this working-class neighborhood, to walk among regular people doing regular things. She'd wanted to remember what normal life looked like before wealth and loss had isolated her completely. She'd wanted to feel something, anything, other than the hollow ache that had become her constant companion. She'd been standing in the wine section, staring at bottles she had no intention of buying, when she heard the child crying. Something about the sound had pulled her attention, a raw vulnerability that cut through the cheerful Christmas music. She'd moved closer, staying out of sight behind displays, and that's when she saw them. The little girl with braids reaching up toward the toy display, the security guard rushing over, his face filled with genuine concern, not the irritation she'd seen so many people show toward crying children in public. The way he'd dropped to his knees without caring that he was in uniform, without worrying about what anyone might think, his entire focus on comforting his daughter. The way he'd held his daughter while she apologized for wanting a Christmas present. Eleanor had heard their entire conversation. Every word had landed like a hammer blow to her carefully protected heart. "I don't need the dolls, Daddy. I just need you to know I'm not sad." What kind of 6-year-old said something like that? What kind of child had learned to suppress her own wants to protect her father's feelings? What kind of world had Eleanor been living in that children had to apologize for wanting toys at Christmas? Eleanor looked at the security guard, now as he stood in front of the toy display, touching the package his daughter had wanted. She saw the longing in his face, the defeat in his posture, the way his shoulders sagged under the weight of everything he couldn't provide. She saw a father who would give anything to make his child happy, but who had nothing left to give, and Eleanor saw her son. Daniel had been 32 when he died, shot while trying to protect a 17-year-old kid during a robbery. The teenager had been crying, terrified, and Daniel had stepped between him and the gunman. The last thing Daniel had done in this world was shield a stranger's child with his own body. Daniel had been a social worker, dedicating his life to helping at-risk youth. He'd worked in the roughest neighborhoods, with the kids everyone else had given up on. He'd believed in second chances, in the power of one person caring enough to make a difference. "Mom," he told her once, just months before he died, "these kids just need someone to see them. Really see them, not as problems or statistics, but as human beings with potential. Everyone writes them off because of where they live or what they look like, but they're just kids who need someone to believe in them." Daniel had seen people. He'd seen their worth when the world told them they were worthless. And someone had killed him for the $47 in his wallet. Eleanor had been destroyed by grief. For months, she'd barely functioned. The business had suffered, managed by others while she sat in her penthouse, staring at nothing. Her health had declined. She'd stopped eating, stopped sleeping, stopped caring whether she lived or died. She'd wanted to die, to join her son and her husband in whatever came after this life. But she hadn't died. She'd survived, though she'd lost the ability to feel anything beyond a dull, persistent ache. She'd returned to work, rebuilt the business, maintained her wealth and power. But she'd done it all from behind walls, keeping everyone at a distance, going through the motions without truly living. Until tonight, watching that security guard with his daughter, Eleanor had felt something stir inside her, something that had been dormant for 5 years. It wasn't joy exactly, it was more like a crack in the ice that had frozen her heart solid. A painful thawing, like feeling returning to frost-bitten fingers. Daniel would have loved this man. This father who worked a job that barely paid enough to survive, who made promises about pancakes and blanket forts because those were the only gifts he could afford. This was exactly the kind of person Daniel had spent his life trying to help. The invisible people, the ones society had decided didn't matter. Eleanor made a decision. She waited until the security guard had moved away from the toy display, back to his post near the entrance. Then she walked over quickly and grabbed the doll set, the Dream House Deluxe Edition, with its $59.99 price tag. She carried it to the checkout, where a teenage cashier with tired eyes scanned it without interest. "That'll be $64.19 with tax." Eleanor pulled out her credit card, but then she paused. She looked at the doll set, thinking about the little girl who wanted it, about the father who couldn't afford it, about the empty gesture this would be if she stopped here. Buying the toy was easy, too easy. It meant nothing. It was the kind of empty gesture Eleanor had been making for years, writing checks to charities, donating to causes, keeping everyone at arm's length while pretending to care. She'd funded entire programs without ever meeting a single person they helped. That's not what Daniel would have done. Daniel would have gotten involved. Daniel would have seen the whole person, not just the immediate need. Daniel would have asked questions, learned their story, found out what would actually help them build a better life. Eleanor put her credit card away. "Actually, I need to speak with your manager. Is Teresa Sullivan working tonight?" The cashier looked confused. Yeah, she's in the back office. Is there a problem with the doll?" "No problem," Eleanor said. "I just need to ask her about something. Could you call her please?" 10 minutes later, Eleanor was sitting in the small office at the back of the store with the night manager. Teresa Sullivan was a woman in her late 40s who looked exhausted and underpaid, her hair pulled back in a practical bun, her Save Mart vest slightly too large for her thin frame. "Mrs. Hayes," Teresa said, clearly nervous about having the owner of the entire chain sitting in her cramped office among stacks of inventory reports and employee schedules. "Is there something wrong? I can assure you we're running everything according to protocol. The store's been doing well, sales are up from last year." "Relax, Teresa," Eleanor said gently, holding up her hand. "I'm not here to check up on you. I'm not here in any official capacity. I need information about one of your security guards. The one working tonight. Tall, late 30s, has a young daughter who was just here." "Ryan Reed," Teresa said immediately, then looked worried. "Is he in some kind of trouble? Because I can vouch for him, Mrs. Hayes. He's one of my best employees. Never late, never complains, always willing to take extra shifts. No trouble." Eleanor interrupted. "Quite the opposite. I witnessed something tonight that impressed me deeply. I'm considering him for a different position, but I need to understand more about his background and his current situation." This was not entirely true, but it was close enough. Eleanor was still forming the plan in her mind, but she needed information first. Teresa seemed to relax slightly, though she still looked uncertain. "What would you like to know?" "Everything. Start from the beginning." Teresa pulled out a personnel file from a locked drawer. "Ryan came to us about 2 years ago through a re-entry employment program. He has an arrest on his record from 10 years ago, but the charges were dropped. No conviction, just the arrest itself, which shows up on background checks. Most places won't hire someone with any kind of record, even if they were never convicted of anything." Eleanor felt anger rising. What was he arrested for? Wrong place, wrong time situation. Police were looking for suspects in a robbery. They swept through his neighborhood and arrested about 20 men, including Ryan. Charges were dropped within 48 hours when they caught the actual suspects, but the arrest stays on his record forever. "That's unjust," Eleanor said quietly. "That's the system," Teresa replied with a tired shrug. "Anyway, Ryan was working construction before his wife got sick. Cancer. She fought it for about a year and a half, but it was bad, aggressive. They had a young daughter, just a toddler at the time. How did he end up here?" Teresa's expression softened. "His wife died about 2 years ago, right around Thanksgiving. Left him with a 4-year-old daughter, and a mountain of medical debt. He lost their apartment, because he'd missed so much work taking care of his wife, had to move in with a friend temporarily. He needed a job immediately, something with flexible hours so he could arrange childcare. We were willing to work with him. And you pay him? Eleanor already knew the answer but wanted to hear it confirmed. Teresa looked uncomfortable. $14 an hour. He works about 35 hours a week. We keep him just under full-time so we don't have to provide benefits package. It's company policy for security positions. Eleanor did the quick math in her head. $14 an hour, 35 hours a week, came to $490 a week before taxes. After federal withholding, state taxes and FICA, he was probably taking home around $400 a week, maybe $1,600 a month. In a city where rent for even a modest apartment cost at least $900 a month. It was impossible. No one could raise a child on that. No one could survive on that and maintain any quality of life. And yet Ryan Reed was doing exactly that. He was showing up every shift, doing his job with dignity, raising his daughter with love, despite having almost nothing. Where does he live now? Eleanor asked. Northside Apartments. It's not in a great area, but the rent's cheap. I think he pays about $850 a month for a one-bedroom. He and his daughter share it. One bedroom. A 6-year-old girl sleeping in the same room as her father because he couldn't afford anything better. How does he manage child care? Eleanor asked. There's an elderly woman in his building, Mrs. Patterson. She watches his daughter when he works nights and weekends, which is most of his shifts. He pays her what he can, but I think she mostly does it out of kindness. She lost her own grandson a few years back and took a liking to Ryan's little girl. Eleanor absorbed all of this, the picture becoming clearer. Ryan Reed was a man surviving on the generosity of an elderly neighbor, working just under full-time hours to avoid getting benefits, living paycheck to paycheck with no safety net whatsoever. One car breakdown, one illness, one unexpected expense, and his entire life would collapse. Tell me about his work performance, Eleanor said. Teresa's face brightened. Honestly, he's incredible. He takes pride in everything he does, even though it's just security work. He knows every regular customer by name. He's broken up fights without anyone getting hurt. He's caught shoplifters, but he always tries to understand why they're stealing first. Last month, he caught a woman trying to steal baby formula. Instead of calling the police, he paid for it himself. $14, which I know for a fact he couldn't afford. Eleanor felt her throat tighten. He paid for it himself, out of his own pocket. When I asked him why, he said she had a hungry baby and no money. He said he couldn't send her to jail for trying to feed her child. That's who Ryan, good person in an impossible situation. Thank you, Teresa, Eleanor said, standing. You've been very helpful. Mrs. Hayes, Teresa said hesitantly, also standing. Whatever you're thinking of doing, Ryan deserves it. He's a good man who's been dealt a bad hand. If there's any way the company can help him, I hope you'll consider it. Eleanor smiled sadly. I'm going to do more than consider it. She left the office and walked back out into the store. She found Ryan at his post near the entrance, standing with perfect posture despite the lateness of the hour, despite everything he was carrying. His eyes scanned the store with practiced alertness, but Eleanor could see the exhaustion underneath. She approached him carefully, not wanting to startle him. Excuse me, you're Ryan Reed. Ryan turned, and Eleanor saw his eyes widen slightly when he recognized her. He'd probably seen her picture in the employee break room, the obligatory photo of the CEO that hung in every Save Mart location. Mrs. Hayes, he said, standing even straighter, his voice careful and professional. Yes, ma'am. Is there something I can help you with? Is there a problem in the store? Eleanor looked at this man, this father who had promised his daughter chocolate chip pancakes and blanket forts because those were the only gifts he could give. This man who had paid for a stranger's baby formula when he barely had enough to feed his own child. And she thought about her son, who had believed in seeing people for who they really were. Actually, Ryan, Eleanor said softly, I think I might be able to help you. Do you have a moment to talk, somewhere private? Ryan felt his pulse quicken. When the owner of the company appeared and said she wanted to talk privately, it usually meant you were about to be fired. He'd seen it happen before. Corporate people like to use soft language. Have a conversation, discuss your future. It all meant the same thing, goodbye. He'd been afraid this might happen after Mia's appearance tonight. Having his daughter show up during his shift, crying, probably looked unprofessional to someone observing from a distance. Maybe Mrs. Hayes thought he couldn't keep his personal life separate from work. Maybe she'd decided he was a liability. Mrs. Hayes, Ryan started, trying to keep his voice steady. If this is about earlier with my daughter, I can explain. Mrs. Patterson has been watching her for 2 years without any issues. Tonight was unusual. Mia had a nightmare and was upset. It won't happen again. I can ensure. It is about earlier, Eleanor interrupted gently. But not in the way you think. Please walk with me. Just for a few minutes. She turned and headed toward the back of the store. Ryan glanced around, saw that the store was quiet with only a few customers, and followed. His mind raced through worst-case scenarios. He needed this job. He couldn't afford to lose it. Not right before Christmas. Not when Mia was depending on him. Not when they were already behind on rent. They walked past the produce section, past the dairy coolers, past the bakery with its racks of day-old bread marked down for clearance. They went all the way to the loading dock at the back of the building. Eleanor pushed open the heavy door and they stepped out into the cold night air. The loading dock was empty at this hour. The trucks all gone, leaving only concrete and shadows and the distant sound of traffic. The security light overhead cast harsh shadows, making everything look stark and uninviting. Eleanor turned to face him. In the harsh overhead light, Ryan could see her more clearly than he had inside. She was an elegant woman, her silver hair cut in a sophisticated style, her wool coat obviously expensive, tailored perfectly. But there was something in her eyes. Pain. Deep old pain that had carved lines into her face despite what must have been excellent medical care. I saw you with your daughter tonight, Eleanor said quietly, her breath visible in the cold air. I heard your conversation. Ryan felt heat rise to his face despite the freezing temperature. I'm sorry if that caused any disruption to your shopping experience, Mrs. Hayes. It won't happen again. I've already spoken with Mrs. Patterson about Ryan. Stop apologizing, Eleanor said firmly, but not unkindly. You have nothing to apologize for. A child needed her father and her father was there for her immediately with complete presence and love. That's not something to be sorry about. That's something to be deeply respected and admired. Ryan didn't know what to say. This conversation was not going where he'd expected. Eleanor took a breath, and when she spoke again her voice was softer, almost vulnerable. I'm going to tell you something I don't usually share with anyone. I had a son, Daniel. He died 5 years ago. He was 32 years old, a social worker who dedicated his life to helping at-risk youth in the toughest neighborhoods. He was killed during a convenience store robbery, shot while trying to protect a scared teenager from the gunman. I'm so sorry, Ryan said softly, meaning it. He knew what it felt like to lose someone you loved. The world became a colder, harder place. Eleanor nodded, her eyes distant, clearly seeing something beyond the loading dock, beyond the present moment. I've been alone since then. My husband died years before. I have no other family, just money. More money than I could spend in 5 lifetimes, a successful business, properties, investments, but no one to share any of it with. No one who needs me. She looked directly at Ryan and he saw tears glistening in her eyes. Do you know what I've learned in these 5 years? Money means nothing if you use it to stay separate from people. It becomes a wall, a prison. And I've been hiding behind that wall since Daniel died, going through the motions of living without actually being alive. Ryan listened, still uncertain where this was leading but beginning to sense it was somewhere unexpected. Tonight, Eleanor continued, her voice gaining strength. I watched a father promise his daughter pancakes and blanket forts for Christmas. And I saw more love in that moment than I've seen in 5 years of charity galas and foundation dinners and board meetings. You were giving her everything you had. Not money, not things, but yourself, your presence, your time, your unconditional love. You made her feel safe and valued even though you couldn't buy her what she wanted. She paused, wiping her eyes. My son would have recognized that immediately. He would have seen your worth, seen the kind of father you are, the kind of man you are. And he would have done something about it. He wouldn't have just walked away. He would have gotten involved. Mrs. Hayes, I don't understand what you're— I want to offer you something, Ryan, Eleanor said. But I need you to hear me out completely before you respond. Can you do that? Ryan nodded slowly, his heart beating faster. The Save Mart Foundation, Eleanor began, is supposed to help communities where our stores operate. We fund scholarships, job training programs, housing assistance. On paper we help thousands of people every year. In reality, I suspect we're failing the people who need help most. We've become bureaucratic, distant, ineffective. We help people who are already on their way to success, not people who are struggling to survive. She looked at Ryan intently. I need someone who understands what real struggle looks like. Someone who knows what families actually need versus what wealthy board members think they need. Someone who's lived in the systems we're trying to fix and can tell us honestly where we're going wrong. Ryan's breath caught. Mrs. Hayes, are you offering me a job? Director of Community Outreach for the Save Mart Foundation, Eleanor said. But Ryan, I need you to understand this isn't charity. This is a genuine offer based on what I believe you can contribute. You have expertise that no amount of education can provide. You understand poverty from the inside. You know which programs work and which ones waste time and money because you've had to navigate all of them yourself. Ryan felt dizzy. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen to people like him. The salary would be $65,000 a year, Eleanor continued. Full benefits package, including health insurance for you and your daughter. There's also housing available. The foundation owns several apartment buildings in safe neighborhoods. We currently have a 3-bedroom unit vacant in Lakewood. Good schools, low crime rate. It would be yours as part of your employment package with a long-term lease agreement. $65,000. Ryan tried to process that number. It was more than 4 times what he made now. It was enough to not just survive but actually live. To give Mia a real childhood. To stop being afraid every single day. Why? Ryan finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Why would you do this for me? You don't know me. You don't know anything about me except what you saw tonight. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears again. Because my son taught me that seeing people, really seeing them as complete human beings, is what matters most in this world. And tonight, I saw you. I saw a father who loves his daughter more than anything. I saw character and dignity in impossible circumstances. I saw everything my son believed in, and fought for. She wiped her eyes with an elegant handkerchief she pulled from her coat pocket. I'm 70 years old, Ryan. I've spent 5 years being angry at the world for taking my son. 5 years writing checks to charities instead of actually helping people the way Daniel wanted me to. Tonight, watching you with your daughter, I remembered what Daniel tried to teach me all his life. That real change happens when you connect with people as human beings, not as charity cases or statistics. Ryan felt his own eyes burning. Mrs. Hayes, I don't have a college degree. I don't have any experience in non-profit work or program management, or, you have exactly the right experience. Eleanor interrupted firmly. You've managed to keep yourself and your daughter housed, fed, and safe on $1,600 a month. That's better budgeting than most of my board members could manage with 10 times that amount. You've navigated social services, housing programs, child care arrangements. You know which programs actually help and which ones just look good on paper. She stepped closer to him. Ryan, I need you to understand something. This job won't be easy. You'll face resistance from board members who don't think you're qualified. You'll have to make difficult decisions about how to allocate resources. You'll need to tell powerful people when their ideas won't work. Can you do that? Ryan thought about Mia, about chocolate chip pancakes and blanket forts, about doctor visits he couldn't afford, and school supplies he had to beg for, about 2 years of grinding poverty that had worn him down to almost nothing, about Lisa's last words asking him to promise he would live, not just survive. He thought about what it would mean to say yes, to have enough money, to give Mia a real home, real opportunities, a real future, to maybe finally keep the promise he'd made to Lisa. But he also thought about the fear. What if he failed? What if he wasn't smart enough, educated enough, capable enough? What if he let Eleanor down? What if he proved all the people who'd ever doubted him right? Mrs. Hayes, Ryan said slowly, I'm scared I'll fail. I'm scared I'm not what you think I am. Eleanor smiled, a genuine smile that softened her entire face. Good. Anyone who wasn't scared taking on this kind of responsibility would be a fool. Fear means you understand what's at stake. But Ryan, I've seen you hold your crying daughter and promise her the world even though you had nothing to give but love. That's not the action of someone who fails. That's the action of someone who succeeds against impossible odds every single day. She pulled a business card from her pocket and handed it to him. This is my personal number. I want you to go home tonight, spend Christmas with your daughter, think about this offer seriously, and then call me Monday morning with your answer. Ryan took the card with shaking hands. What about the doll? The one Mia wanted. I purchased it while you were on your parking lot check. Eleanor said, it's at customer service wrapped and ready. Merry Christmas, Ryan. Whether you take this job or not, your daughter deserves a happy Christmas. Consider it a gift from someone who remembers what it's like to love a child completely. Before Ryan could respond, before he could begin to process any of this, Eleanor turned and walked back into the store, leaving him standing on the loading dock, holding a business card that might just change his entire life. Ryan stood there for a long moment, the cold seeping through his thin jacket, but he barely felt it. His mind felt slow, unable to keep up with the sudden shift in reality. Then it hit him all at once. $65,000 a year, health insurance, a 3-bedroom apartment in a safe neighborhood, a doll set for Mia, a chance to actually help people instead of just surviving day to day. Ryan covered his face with his hands and wept. Great heaving sobs that came from somewhere deep inside, from a place where he'd been holding terror and exhaustion and desperation for 2 years. He cried for Lisa, who should have been here to see this, who would have been so proud. He cried for Mia, who deserved so much more than he'd been able to give her, who might finally get the childhood she deserved. He cried for himself, for the weight he'd been carrying alone for so long, for the fear that had been his constant companion. And he cried with relief, with hope, with the overwhelming feeling that maybe, just maybe, everything was going to be okay. When Ryan finally composed himself and went back inside, wiping his eyes with his sleeve, he found the doll set waiting at customer service, wrapped in shiny red paper with a silver bow on top. The customer service representative, a young woman named Jennifer, smiled at him. Mrs. Hayes left this for you. She said to make sure you got it before you left tonight. Ryan picked up the package, cradling it carefully. Thank you. The rest of his shift passed in a blur. He couldn't focus on anything except the impossible thing that had just happened. Eleanor Hayes, one of the wealthiest women in the state, had offered him a life, not just a job, but an actual life. When his shift ended at 2 in the morning, Ryan collected the wrapped doll set and walked out into the freezing night, but he didn't feel the cold. He felt warm for the first time in 2 years, warm with possibility. He took the bus home, the last bus of the night, with only 3 other passengers, all of them looking as tired as Ryan usually felt. But tonight was different. Tonight he sat there cradling the gift in his arms, thinking about Mia's face when she opened it, thinking about Eleanor Hayes's offer, thinking about a future that looked completely different than the one he'd imagined just hours ago. When he arrived at Northside Apartments, the building looked even more run down than usual. Graffiti on the walls, broken security lights, the smell of garbage from the overflowing dumpsters. But soon, if he said yes, they wouldn't have to live here anymore. Ryan unlocked his door quietly, trying not to wake Mia, but she was already awake, sitting on the small couch in her pajamas, waiting for him. Mrs. Patterson sat beside her, dozing lightly. "Daddy," Mia whispered loudly, jumping up and running to him. She threw her arms around his legs. Ryan picked her up with one arm, holding the wrapped package with the other. "Baby girl, what are you doing awake? It's so late, I couldn't sleep," Mia said. "I wanted to wait for you." Mrs. Patterson woke up, blinking. "Oh Ryan, I'm sorry." She refused to go to bed, said she needed to see you tonight. "It's okay, Mrs. Patterson, thank you for staying with her." Ryan set Mia down gently. "Why don't you head home and get some rest?" After Mrs. Patterson left, Ryan sat on the couch with Mia curled up beside him. She was staring at the wrapped package with wide eyes. "Is that for me?" she asked quietly. "Why don't you open it and find out?" Ryan said, his voice thick with emotion. Mia didn't need to be told twice. She tore into the wrapping paper with the pure enthusiasm only a 6-year-old could muster. When she saw what was inside, she gasped so loudly it echoed in their small apartment. The dream house. Daddy, it's the dream house. The real one with the lights. Merry Christmas, Mia. She looked up at him with Lisa's eyes, filled with pure unfiltered joy. How did you get it? How did you afford it? Ryan pulled her close. Someone very kind wanted to make sure you had a good Christmas. A very special lady who saw how much you wanted it. Mia hugged the doll set tightly, then hugged Ryan even tighter. This is the best Christmas ever, Daddy. The very best. Ryan held his daughter, breathing in the smell of her strawberry shampoo, feeling her heartbeat against his chest, feeling the warmth of her small body pressed against his. I love you, baby girl, more than anything in the whole world. I love you too, Daddy. They sat like that for a long time, just holding each other. Then Mia pulled back and looked at the dollhouse again, her eyes shining. Can we set it up now, please? Ryan laughed, the sound surprising him. When was the last time he'd laughed? It's 2:30 in the morning, sweetheart. Please, just a little bit. I promise I'll go to sleep right after. How could he say no to that face? Okay, just for a little while. They spent the next hour setting up the tiny furniture, arranging the miniature rooms, turning on the little lights that actually worked just like the package promised. Mia created elaborate stories about the doll family, giving them names and personalities, building a world where everyone was happy and safe and loved. Ryan watched her play, his heart so full it felt like it might burst. This was what childhood should look like. Joy, imagination, security. Finally, around 3:30, Mia's eyes started to droop. Ryan carried her to the bed they shared, tucked her in under the warm blankets, and kissed her forehead. Daddy, Mia said sleepily. Yes, baby, thank you for the best Christmas present ever. You're welcome, sweetheart. Now get some sleep. Daddy, yes, I think Mama sent that nice lady to help us. I think she's watching over us from heaven. Ryan felt tears sting his eyes. I think you might be right, baby girl. Within minutes, Mia was asleep, the dollhouse beside the bed where she could see it first thing when she woke up. Ryan sat in the old armchair they'd salvaged from a curb, the only other piece of furniture in their one-room apartment besides the bed and a small table. He pulled out Eleanor Hayes's business card, and looked at it in the dim light, filtering in from the street. Her name embossed in elegant script, her personal cell phone number written in ink at the bottom. Ryan turned the card over in his hands, still not quite believing any of this was real. $65,000 a year, a 3-bedroom apartment, health insurance, a chance to help other people escape the poverty trap that had held him for so long. A chance to keep his promise to Lisa that he would live, not just survive, but could he really do it? Could he really work alongside educated people with degrees and credentials? Could he hold his own in board meetings and budget discussions? Could he be the person Eleanor Hayes seemed to think he was? Ryan looked at his daughter, sleeping peacefully for the first time in weeks, clutching her new doll. He thought about Lisa, who had believed in him even when he didn't believe in himself, who had told him he was stronger than he knew, braver than he felt, more capable than he gave himself credit for. I'll try, Lisa, he whispered into the darkness, for Mia, for you, for all the other families out there struggling like we've been struggling, I'll try. Tomorrow was Christmas Day, and Ryan had promised Mia chocolate chip pancakes and blanket forts and princess movies. They would have that day together, just the two of them, celebrating with the kind of simple joy that didn't require money. And then Monday, Ryan would call Eleanor Hayes. He would say yes. He would take the leap into this terrifying, impossible, wonderful opportunity. Because maybe that's what faith was. Not knowing if you'd succeed, but trying anyway because the alternative was staying trapped in a life that was slowly crushing you. Ryan finally fell asleep in the armchair as dawn began to lighten the sky, Eleanor's business card still clutched in his hand, and for the first time in 2 years, he dreamed of something other than survival. He dreamed of possibility. Christmas Day dawned cold and bright. Ryan woke stiff in the armchair, his neck aching from the awkward angle. For a moment he thought last night had been a dream, but then he saw the business card still in his hand, and the wrapped dollhouse beside Mia's bed, and he knew it was real. Mia woke up an hour later and immediately went to her new toy, her face glowing with happiness. They spent the morning exactly as Ryan had promised. He made chocolate chip pancakes shaped like smiley faces, using the last of their pancake mix and the chocolate chips he'd been saving for a special occasion. They watched the princess movie 3 times. They built the biggest blanket fort their small apartment had ever seen, using every sheet and blanket they owned, draping them over chairs and the bed, and creating a cozy cave where they pretended to be explorers discovering a magical kingdom. And through it all, Ryan felt lighter than he had in 2 years, not because of the job offer, though that was part of it, but because for one day he wasn't worrying about money, or rent, or whether they'd have enough food next week. He was just being present with his daughter, being the father she deserved. That evening, after Mia had fallen asleep exhausted from excitement, Ryan sat down with a piece of paper and made 2 lists, one column labeled, reasons to say yes, one column labeled, reasons to say no, reasons to say yes, enough money to actually support Mia properly, health insurance for both of us, safe housing in a good neighborhood, chance to help other families, opportunity to honor Lisa's memory by living, not just surviving. Mia deserves better than this apartment. Reasons to say no, I might fail, no college degree, no experience in this kind of work, board members might not respect me. What if I'm not smart enough? What if Eleanor realizes she made a mistake? Ryan stared at the 2 lists. The say no list was all fear. The say yes list was all hope. Lisa's voice echoed in his memory. Ryan, read, you're going to stop letting fear make your decisions. You're going to start believing in yourself the way I believe in you. That had been 6 months before she died, when the cancer treatment wasn't working, and they both knew she was running out of time. She gripped his hand with what little strength she had left and made him promise. Promise me you'll take chances. Promise me you won't play it safe just because you're scared. Promise me you'll give Mia a father who fights for a better life, not one who accepts whatever scraps the world throws at him. He'd promised, and now here was his chance to keep that promise. Ryan picked up his phone and looked at the time. 8:45 on Christmas night, too late to call, but first thing Monday morning, he would call Eleanor Hayes and say yes. The weekend passed in a strange mixture of excitement and terror. Ryan told Mrs. Patterson about the job offer. The elderly woman cried with joy, hugging him tightly. I knew something good would come your way, she said. I've been praying for it every night. You're a good man, Ryan. You deserve this. Monday morning arrived cold and clear. Ryan waited until 9 o'clock, then dialed Eleanor's personal number with shaking hands. She answered on the second ring. Ryan, yes ma'am. Mrs. Hayes, I hope I'm not calling too early. Not at all, I've been waiting for your call. Her voice was warm but also businesslike. What's your answer? Ryan took a deep breath. I want to say yes, but I need to be honest with you about something first. Go ahead. I'm terrified I'll fail. I'm terrified I won't be good enough. I don't have the education or the credentials or the experience that someone in this position should have. If you're having second thoughts, I would understand. Eleanor was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was firm. Ryan, do you know what credentials my son Daniel had when he started working with at-risk youth? A social work degree and absolutely no real-world experience. He learned everything that mattered from the kids he was trying to help. He learned by listening, by making mistakes, by caring enough to keep trying, even when it was hard. She paused. I'm not looking for someone with perfect credentials. I'm looking for someone with character and honesty and the humility to admit when they don't know something. You have all of that, so I'll ask you again. What's your answer? Yes, Ryan said, his voice growing stronger. Yes, Mrs. Hayes, I'll take the job. I'll work harder than anyone you've ever employed. I promise you that. I know you will. Can you come to my office this afternoon? We have a lot to discuss. I'll be there. What time? 2 o'clock. The address is on my business card. Ask for Patricia Simmons when you arrive. She's my executive assistant and she'll be working closely with you. After they hung up, Ryan stood in his apartment, his heart pounding. He'd done it. He'd said yes. Now he just had to figure out how to not mess this up. That afternoon, Ryan put on the same thrift store suit he'd worn to Lisa's funeral. It was the only suit he owned. He dropped Mia off with Mrs. Patterson, took 2 buses downtown, and arrived at the gleaming office building 15 minutes early. The lobby was intimidating: marble floors, a security desk staffed by people in crisp uniforms much nicer than the Save Mart security uniform he was used to, a directory board listing companies with impressive-sounding names. Ryan checked in at the security desk where a guard who looked about his age gave him a visitor badge and directed him to the elevator. The ride to the 15th floor felt like ascending to another planet. Ryan's reflection in the polished elevator doors showed a man trying very hard to look like he belonged. The suit didn't fit quite right. The shoes were scuffed despite his best efforts to polish them. He looked exactly like what he was, someone from a different world trying to pass. When the elevator doors opened, he found himself in a reception area that looked like something from a magazine. Modern furniture, abstract art on the walls, everything clean and expensive and completely foreign to his experience. A woman sat behind an elegant desk. She was in her 60s with gray hair styled in a sophisticated cut, wearing a burgundy suit that probably cost more than Ryan made in a month. But when she saw him, her face broke into a warm, genuine smile. "You must be Ryan," she said, standing to greet him. "I'm Patricia Simmons, but please call me Patricia. Mrs. Hayes has told me all about you. It's wonderful to finally meet you." Ryan shook her hand, relieved by her warmth. "Thank you, ma'am. I mean, Patricia, I'm a little nervous, to be honest." Patricia's smile deepened. "That's completely understandable, but there's no need to be. We're all just regular people here doing our best to make a difference. Well, except Mrs. Hayes is perhaps a bit more formidable than most, but her heart is in the right place." She led him down a hallway lined with photographs. Ryan noticed they were all images of Save Mart employees, cashiers smiling at customers, stock workers arranging shelves, managers helping elderly shoppers, real people doing real work. Mrs. Hayes had these put up after her son died. Patricia explained, noticing his interest. "Daniel believed the company existed to serve its employees and the communities where we operate, not the other way around. His mother is trying very hard to honor that vision, though she'll admit she lost her way for a while after he passed." They reached a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Eleanor Hayes sat behind a large desk, reading something on her computer. She looked up when they entered, and her face softened when she saw Ryan. "Welcome." She stood and came around the desk to shake his hand. Not a brief, perfunctory handshake, but a firm grip that lasted several seconds, her eyes meeting his directly. "How was the rest of your Christmas?" "Best one we've had in years, thanks to you," Ryan said honestly. "Mia hasn't stopped playing with that dollhouse. She's created entire stories about the family that lives there. It's brought her more joy than I can express." Eleanor smiled and Ryan saw her eyes glisten slightly. "I'm glad. That's exactly what Christmas should be about. Children experiencing pure joy." She gestured to the chairs in front of her desk. "Sit please, we have a lot to discuss. Patricia, could you bring some coffee?" Ryan sat in one of the leather chairs, trying not to think about how out of place he felt. Patricia poured coffee from an elegant carafe on a side table and handed him a cup in real china, not the disposable cups he was used to. "Cream or sugar?" Patricia asked. "Black is fine, thank you." After Patricia excused herself, Eleanor settled back into her chair, studying Ryan for a moment with an expression he couldn't quite read. "I'm going to be direct with you, Ryan," she finally said. "The Save Mart Foundation has been essentially dormant for the past 5 years, since Daniel died. I've let it run on autopilot, funding the same programs year after year without really examining whether they're effective or just perpetuating the same systems that keep people trapped." She pulled out a thick folder and slid it across the desk. "These are our current initiatives: scholarship programs, job training, housing assistance, food security programs. On paper they look impressive. We fund dozens of organizations. We distribute millions of dollars. We produce glossy annual reports about our impact." Ryan opened the folder and began reading. Even with his limited experience, he could see problems immediately. The scholarship program required a minimum grade point average of 3.5, participation in at least 2 extracurricular activities, and letters of recommendation from teachers. The job training taught skills like basic computer literacy and resume writing, but didn't connect participants with actual employers. The housing assistance required so much documentation that it would take months to process an application. These programs, Ryan started, then hesitated, uncertain how to phrase what he was thinking without offending the woman who had just hired him. "Speak your mind," Eleanor said firmly. "That's literally what I hired you for, Ryan. To tell me the truth about what works and what doesn't. I can't fix problems I don't understand." Ryan took a breath, then decided to be completely honest. These programs are designed for people who are already on their way to success, not for people who are drowning. A kid with a 3.5 GPA and multiple extracurriculars probably has parents who can support them, who can help with college costs if needed. The kids who really need scholarships are the ones working after-school jobs to help pay rent. They don't have time for extracurriculars. They're too exhausted to maintain perfect grades. Eleanor nodded slowly. "Go on." "The job training is teaching generic skills that every program teaches. Everyone knows how to write a resume. What people need is training in specific in-demand skills that lead to actual jobs. And this needs to happen in partnership with employers who are willing to hire program graduates." "And the housing assistance?" Eleanor prompted. Ryan felt his frustration rising as he read through the requirements. By the time someone navigates this bureaucracy and gathers all this documentation, they've already been evicted. When you're facing eviction, you need help this week, not in 3 months. You need someone who can call your landlord and negotiate or provide emergency funds immediately. He looked up at Eleanor, suddenly worried he'd been too critical. But she was smiling. "In 10 minutes you've identified every single flaw in programs our board has been running for years," Eleanor said. "This is exactly why I hired you, Ryan. You see things clearly because you've lived them. You know the difference between what sounds good in a boardroom and what actually helps people on the street." Over the next several hours, they worked through each program with Ryan pointing out problems and Eleanor asking questions, taking notes, pushing him to explain his reasoning. Patricia brought in sandwiches for lunch, and they ate while they continued working. "Tell me about Mia," Eleanor said during a brief break. "How do you think she'll adjust to changing schools?" Ryan felt anxiety spike. "I'm nervous about it. She's been in an underfunded school her whole life. Small classes because half the kids are chronically absent. Teachers who are doing their best but don't have resources. I'm worried she might be behind compared to kids in better schools." "Children are resilient," Eleanor said gently. "And from what I saw, your daughter is smart and well-loved. That's the foundation everything else builds on. The school in Lakewood is excellent. They have support services for students who need extra help. I'll make sure Mia gets whatever she needs to succeed." "Her mother was the smart one," Ryan said softly. "Lisa was a nurse before she got sick. She worked so hard to get through nursing school while taking care of Mia as a baby. She always said she wanted Mia to have the opportunities she never had. To go to college, to have real choices in life. And now Mia will have those opportunities," Eleanor said. "Because of you. Because you kept going even when it would have been so much easier to give up." Ryan felt tears threatening. "There were days I wanted to give up. Days when I sat on the floor of our apartment after Mia fell asleep and I just cried because I couldn't see any way forward. Because I was so tired of fighting. But you didn't give up," Eleanor said firmly. "You showed up for every shift. You paid your rent even when you had to skip meals. You made sure Mia felt loved even when you had nothing else to give her. That's not weakness, Ryan. That's incredible strength. That's incredible strength." They worked until evening, finally calling it a day when the sun had set and the office was dark except for desk lamps. Ryan's head was spinning with information about budgets and programs and organizational structures, but underneath the overwhelm he felt something else: excitement. For the first time in 2 years he was excited about work, about making a real difference instead of just collecting a paycheck. As Ryan prepared to leave, Eleanor stopped him. "Ryan, I want you to understand something. Over the next few months we're going to face significant resistance, from board members who don't want these programs to change, from partner organizations who benefit from the current system, from people who will question your qualifications and doubt whether you belong in this role." "I understand," Ryan said. "Do you?" Eleanor asked, her eyes searching his face. "Because it's going to get difficult. People will be cruel, they'll make you feel small, they'll look at you and see only what you lack instead of what you bring. They'll try to push you out." Ryan thought about 2 years of being looked down on, of being treated like he was less than human because he was poor, of customers who looked through him as if he were invisible, of managers who spoke to him like he was stupid. I've been dealing with that my whole life, Mrs. Hayes. I'm not afraid of people who think they're better than me. Eleanor nodded approvingly. Good, because we're about to show this city what real community support looks like. And it's going to start with your perspective, your honesty, and your refusal to accept systems that don't actually help people. She walked him to the elevator. The apartment in Lakewood will be ready in 2 weeks. That should give you time to give notice at your current place and pack. Patricia will email you all the details tomorrow. Your first official day is January 3rd. That gives you a week to settle into the new place with Mia before you start. Mrs. Hayes, Ryan said as the elevator doors opened. I just want to say thank you for seeing me, for believing in me, for giving Mia and me a chance at a real life. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. Don't thank me yet, Ryan. This work won't be easy, but I think we can build something important together. Something my son would have been proud of. The elevator doors closed and Ryan rode down alone, his mind reeling. He looked at his reflection in the polished doors. Same face, same worn suit, but somehow he looked different, like he was carrying himself differently, like he was allowing himself to believe, just a little bit, that maybe he really could do this. When Ryan got home that night, Mia was playing with her dollhouse while Mrs. Patterson watched. The moment she saw her father, Mia jumped up and ran to him. Daddy, how was your meeting? Ryan picked her up and spun her around. It was good, baby girl. Really, really good. Did you get the job? I did, and you know what that means. What? It means in 2 weeks we're moving to a new apartment, and you're going to have your very own bedroom. A whole room just for you. Mia's eyes went wide. My own room? Really? Really? And it's in a neighborhood with good schools and parks and everything you could want. Mia threw her arms around his neck. This is the best Christmas ever, Daddy. Even better than the dollhouse. After Mrs. Patterson left and Mia was asleep, Ryan sat at their small table with a notebook and pen. He began writing down ideas, programs that could actually help families like his own. Emergency assistance funds that didn't require 3 months of paperwork. Child care support for working parents. Transportation vouchers for people whose cars had broken down. Partnerships with employers to create job training that led to actual employment. Scholarships based on resilience and responsibility rather than perfect grades. He wrote until his hand cramped, ideas flowing faster than he could capture them. For the first time since Lisa died, Ryan felt like he had a purpose beyond simple survival. He was going to help people. Real people. People who were invisible to most of the world, but who deserved to be seen, to be valued, to be given real chances to build better lives. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of activity. Ryan gave notice at Save Mart. Dale, his supervisor, barely looked up from his clipboard when Ryan told him, "Fine, you're scheduled through the end of the month so you'll work your remaining shifts." No congratulations, no acknowledgement that Ryan had worked there faithfully for 2 years, just cold efficiency. But Teresa, the night manager, pulled Ryan aside with tears in her eyes. "I'm so happy for you, Ryan. You deserve this more than anyone I know. Go do good things for people who need it." Ryan and Mia spent every spare moment packing their few possessions. They didn't have much. Clothes, a few books, Mia's toys, the dollhouse, carefully wrapped in towels for the move. Everything they owned fit into 6 boxes and 2 suitcases. Mrs. Patterson cried when they said goodbye. "You promise you'll come visit me? I'm going to miss my little Mia so much." "We'll visit every week," Ryan promised. "Your family, Mrs. Patterson. We're not going to forget that." On January 2nd, a moving truck provided by the Save Mart Foundation arrived. 2 professional movers loaded everything in 15 minutes. Ryan and Mia took one last look at the apartment that had been their home for 2 years. "Goodbye, old place," Mia said solemnly. "Thank you for keeping us safe." The apartment in Lakewood was like something from a dream. 3 bedrooms, a full kitchen with appliances that actually worked, a living room with windows that didn't rattle in the wind, hardwood floors, fresh paint, everything clean and safe and warm. Mia ran from room to room, squealing with delight. "This one's mine. Can this be my room, Daddy? It has a closet. A real closet. Whichever room you want, baby." That night, after they'd unpacked and set up Mia's bed in her new room, Ryan tucked her in for the first time in a space that was just hers. Daddy, Mia said as he turned out the light. Yes, baby, I think Mama would be really proud of you. Ryan felt his throat tighten. You think so? I know so. You take really good care of me, and now you're going to help other people too. That's what Mama always did. She helped people get better when they were sick. Your Mama was the best person I ever knew, Ryan said softly. You're the best person I know, Mia replied. Good night, Daddy. I love you. I love you too, baby girl. Sweet dreams. Ryan walked through his new home, still not quite believing it was real. He had a home. A real home, safe, warm, in a good neighborhood where Mia could play outside without him being terrified something might happen to her. He thought about Eleanor Hayes, this woman who had seen him at his lowest moment and had chosen to lift him up instead of walking past. He thought about her son Daniel, who had believed in seeing people as complete human beings. Tomorrow was his first official day at the Save Mart Foundation. Tomorrow he would walk into an office as Director of Community Outreach. Tomorrow he would start the work of actually helping people escape the poverty trap he'd been caught in for so long. But tonight Ryan allowed himself to simply feel grateful. Grateful for Eleanor. Grateful for this chance. Grateful that Mia was sleeping peacefully in her own room for the first time in her life. He pulled out his phone and looked at the photo he'd set as his wallpaper. Lisa smiling at the camera, holding baby Mia. This photo had been taken 6 years ago, before cancer had stolen her health and her life. I'm doing it, Lisa, Ryan whispered to the photo. I'm living, not just surviving. I'm taking chances. I'm fighting for a better life. I'm keeping my promise. And somewhere he hoped Lisa was smiling. Ryan's first official day at the Save Mart Foundation arrived, cold and cloudy, the early January weather matching his nervous energy. He'd barely slept, too anxious about making a good impression, about proving he deserved this opportunity. He dressed carefully in a new suit Patricia had arranged to have delivered to his apartment. Navy blue, perfectly fitted, with a crisp white shirt and a burgundy tie. When he looked in the mirror, he barely recognized himself. He looked professional, competent, like someone who belonged in a corporate office. But inside he still felt like Ryan Reed from Northside Apartments, terrified he was about to be exposed as a fraud. Mia came into the bathroom and stared up at him with wide eyes. Daddy, you look like a movie star. Ryan laughed despite his nerves. I don't know about that, baby. You do. You look so handsome and important. He knelt down and kissed her forehead. I'm just your daddy, same as always. Now you be good for Mrs. Patterson today, okay? This is my first day, and I need to focus. Mrs. Patterson had agreed to continue watching Mia until Ryan could arrange more permanent child care. She'd taken the bus over that morning, refusing Ryan's offer to pay for a taxi. Go make us proud, Mrs. Patterson said, hugging him tightly. You're going to do wonderful things, Ryan Reed. I just know it. The bus ride downtown felt different today. Ryan wasn't heading to a security job where he'd stand on his feet for 12 hours. He was heading to an office where he'd work alongside educated professionals to help people build better lives. When he arrived at the foundation offices, Patricia was waiting with a warm smile. Good morning, Ryan. Welcome to your first official day. How are you feeling? Terrified, Ryan admitted. Patricia laughed kindly. That's perfectly normal. But you're going to be wonderful. Now come, let me show you your office. She led him to a modest but comfortable office with a desk, computer and window overlooking the city. On the desk was a nameplate that read Ryan Reed, Director of Community Outreach. Ryan stared at it, feeling surreal. 2 weeks ago he'd been a security guard making $14 an hour. Now he had a title, an office, a nameplate. Take a moment to settle in, Patricia said. Mrs. Hayes wants to meet with you at 9:30 to go over your first week's priorities. In the meantime, I've left some files on your desk. Background information on our current programs and partner organizations. After Patricia left, Ryan sat at his desk and tried to steady his breathing. He could do this. He'd survived 2 years of grinding poverty while keeping his daughter safe and loved. He could certainly handle an office job. At 9:30, he walked to Eleanor's office. She was on the phone but gestured for him to come in and sit. He listened to one side of a conversation about quarterly earnings and store expansion plans, getting a glimpse of the business side of Eleanor's life. When she hung up, she smiled at him. Good morning, Ryan. How does it feel to be officially employed? Surreal, Ryan said. Honestly, I keep waiting to wake up and find out this was all a dream. It's real, I assure you. Now let's talk about your first week. I want you to spend most of your time learning. Read through all our current program files. Meet with our partner organizations. Ask questions. Get a sense of what we're doing right and what we're doing wrong. Okay, Ryan said, taking notes. But I also want you to trust your instincts, Eleanor continued. You have expertise that comes from lived experience. If something doesn't make sense to you, there's probably a good reason. Don't be afraid to say so. Over the next several days, Ryan immersed himself in learning the Foundation's operations. He met with directors of partner organizations, toured facilities, reviewed budgets and impact reports, and the more he learned, the more troubled he became. One scholarship program had distributed funds to 42 students the previous year. 41 of them came from suburban schools. Only one came from an inner-city school. The program claimed to serve underserved communities, but in reality was serving middle-class students who didn't actually need the help. A job training program taught participants how to use Microsoft Office and write resumes, then sent them out into the job market, with no connections to employers. Only 12% of participants found employment within 6 months of completing the program. The Housing Assistance Program had helped 33 families the previous year, but Ryan discovered that over 200 families had applied. The other 167 had given up after months of paperwork and bureaucratic delays. On Friday of his first week, Eleanor called a meeting with Ryan and the Foundation's small staff. 4 people total: Patricia, a program coordinator named Jennifer, a finance manager named Robert, and an administrative assistant named Tom. Ryan has been here 1 week, Eleanor said. I want to hear his initial impressions. No filter, complete honesty. Ryan took a breath, then decided there was no point in softening the truth. Our programs are failing the people who need them most. We're helping people who are already on their way to success instead of people who are drowning. We're creating bureaucratic barriers that make it nearly impossible for the most vulnerable to get help. And we're measuring success by how much money we distribute instead of by whether people's lives actually improve. The room went silent. Jennifer looked shocked. Robert frowned. Tom looked down at his notepad. Explain, Eleanor said calmly. Ryan pulled out the reports he'd been reviewing. This scholarship program, we claim to serve underserved communities, but 41 out of 42 recipients last year came from suburban schools. That's not serving underserved communities. That's serving middle-class families. Those students met our criteria, Jennifer said defensively. They had the required GPAs and extracurricular involvement. Exactly, Ryan said. The criteria are the problem. You can't have a 3.5 GPA and participate in multiple extracurriculars if you're working 20 hours a week to help your family pay rent. The kids who really need scholarships are being systematically excluded by criteria that favor privilege. Jennifer's face reddened. That's not fair. We have standards for a reason. I'm not saying we shouldn't have standards, Ryan replied. I'm saying our standards are measuring the wrong things. A kid who maintains a 3.0 while working and caring for younger siblings is showing more resilience and responsibility than a kid with a 4.0 whose biggest challenge is choosing which AP class to take. Eleanor nodded slowly. Continue. Ryan went through each program, explaining the disconnects he saw between stated goals and actual outcomes. The job training that didn't connect people to jobs. The housing assistance that moved too slowly to actually prevent evictions. The food security program that required families to travel to a central distribution site instead of delivering to neighborhoods where people needed help. By the time he finished, Jennifer looked angry, Robert looked troubled, and Tom was scribbling notes furiously. These are serious allegations, Jennifer said stiffly. Our programs have been running successfully for years. Successfully for whom? Ryan asked. Not for the people I used to live next door to. Not for families like mine was 2 weeks ago. This is what I hired Ryan to do, Eleanor said firmly. To tell us uncomfortable truths. Jennifer, I want you to work with Ryan next week to redesign the scholarship criteria. Robert, I want a full analysis of which programs are actually producing measurable improvements in people's lives, versus which ones just look good on paper. After the meeting ended, Jennifer approached Ryan in the hallway. She was in her early 50s, white, with perfect hair and designer glasses. "You've been here 1 week," she said coldly. "1 week, and you think you understand our work better than people who've been doing this for years." Ryan met her gaze steadily. "I don't think I understand your work better than you. I think I understand poverty better than you. There's a difference. You're going to alienate everyone on the staff if you keep this up," Jennifer warned. "We're a team here. We don't appreciate outsiders coming in and criticizing everything we've built." "Then maybe you should have built better," Ryan said quietly. Jennifer's face went pale with anger. She walked away without another word. That evening Ryan told Eleanor about the confrontation. They were in her office, the city lights twinkling below as darkness fell. "Should I have handled that differently?" Ryan asked. "Been more diplomatic." Eleanor shook her head. "You spoke the truth. Jennifer's been with the foundation for 12 years, and in that time, our impact has steadily declined while our budget has steadily increased. She's invested in maintaining systems that aren't working because changing them would mean admitting she's been doing it wrong. She's going to make my life difficult," Ryan said. "Probably," Eleanor agreed, "but that's not your concern. Your concern is doing what's right for the people we're supposed to be helping. Jennifer will either adapt or find herself looking for another job." Ryan went home that night exhausted. Mia was already asleep, having spent the day with Mrs. Patterson. Ryan stood in the doorway of her new bedroom, watching her sleep surrounded by her dolls and stuffed animals. This was why he was doing this. This little girl and all the other little girls and boys whose parents were working impossible jobs for impossible wages, trying to build impossible lives. The weekend passed too quickly. On Saturday, Ryan took Mia to the park near their new apartment. It was beautiful and safe, with new playground equipment and families everywhere. Mia made friends with other children immediately, her natural warmth drawing them in. Ryan watched her play, his heart full. This was what childhood should look like. Safe, joyful, full of possibility. On Sunday they visited Mrs. Patterson, bringing her flowers and spending the afternoon playing board games. The elderly woman cried when they left, hugging Mia tightly. "Don't be a stranger," she said to Ryan. "You're still my family no matter where you live." "Always," Ryan promised. Monday morning arrived too quickly. Ryan's second week began with the promised meeting with Jennifer to redesign the scholarship criteria. She came into his office with a tight smile and a folder full of documents. "I've been thinking about what you said," Jennifer began, her tone carefully controlled. "And while I don't agree with all your criticisms, I'm willing to consider some modifications to the criteria." They spent 3 hours working through it. Jennifer wanted to maintain high GPA requirements. Ryan argued for a holistic review that considered circumstances. Jennifer wanted letters of recommendation from teachers. Ryan argued that students in underfunded schools might not have teachers with time to write detailed letters. Finally, Ryan leaned back in his chair. "Can I ask you something, Jennifer? Have you ever been poor?" Jennifer stiffened. "I don't see how that's relevant." "It's completely relevant. Have you ever had to choose between buying food and paying rent? Have you ever worked 2 jobs while trying to finish school? Have you ever had to tell your child they can't have something they need because you literally don't have the money?" "No," Jennifer said coldly. "I haven't. I worked hard and made good choices." "I worked hard too," Ryan said quietly. "I made good choices too. And I still ended up poor because my wife got cancer and died, leaving me with medical debt and a daughter to raise alone. Poverty isn't about choices, Jennifer. It's about circumstances." Jennifer was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. "What do you propose? What do you propose?" They hammered out new criteria together. GPA would still matter, but there would be context considerations. A 3.0 from a student working 20 hours a week would be weighted differently than a 3.0 from a student with no responsibilities. Letters of recommendation would be optional. Instead, students could write essays about their responsibilities, their challenges, their resilience. By the end of the week, they had a draft Ryan felt good about. Jennifer still seemed skeptical, but she'd stopped actively fighting him. On Friday afternoon, Eleanor called Ryan to her office. "The board is meeting next week. They want to meet you." Ryan felt his stomach drop. Already they're curious about the new hire, and they've heard about the proposed changes to our programs. Some of them are concerned. Concerned how? Eleanor chose her words carefully. The board is composed primarily of wealthy donors who've been involved with the foundation for years. They're used to programs that look good at fundraising events. They're less interested in programs that actually require them to examine their assumptions about poverty. You're saying they're not going to like me. I'm saying some of them will resist change. Charles Bennett in particular. He's been on the board for 20 years, very set in his ways, very convinced he knows what's best for those people. Eleanor said the last two words with clear distaste. When's the meeting? Tuesday, 10 o'clock. I want you to present the new scholarship criteria and explain your reasoning. Be prepared for pushback. Ryan spent the weekend preparing. He created a presentation showing the flaws in the current system and the benefits of the new approach. He practiced his talking points. He tried not to think about standing in front of wealthy board members who would judge whether someone like him belonged in this role. Tuesday morning arrived too quickly. Ryan put on his best suit, kissed Mia goodbye and headed to the office with his heart pounding. The board meeting was held in a large conference room Ryan hadn't seen before. Expensive table, leather chairs, original artwork on the walls, everything designed to intimidate. 8 people sat around the table when Ryan entered with Eleanor. All of them were older, well-dressed, white. They looked at Ryan with expressions ranging from curiosity to barely concealed hostility. Eleanor made introductions. Charles Bennett sat at the far end of the table. He was in his mid-70s, wearing an expensive suit, his white hair perfectly styled. His expression when he looked at Ryan was cold assessment. "Mr. Reed," Charles said, his voice dripping with condescension. "I understand you've been with us for 2 weeks. Quite a jump from security guard to foundation director. Mrs. Hayes must see something remarkable in you." There was no mistaking the skepticism in his tone. "I see someone who understands poverty from lived experience," Eleanor said firmly, "something this board could benefit from." "Indeed," Charles said, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Well, Mr. Reed, we're eager to hear your thoughts on our scholarship program. I understand you have some concerns." Ryan stood and set up his presentation, his hands shaking slightly. He'd faced down angry customers and aggressive shoplifters during his time in security. He'd navigated poverty and grief and impossible choices. He could handle a room full of wealthy skeptics, he hoped. "Thank you for having me," Ryan began, his voice steadier than he felt. "I've spent the last 2 weeks reviewing the Foundation's programs, and I've identified some significant disconnects between our stated goals and our actual outcomes." He pulled up his first slide showing the scholarship program statistics. "Last year we awarded 42 scholarships. Our mission statement says we serve underserved communities, but 41 of those 42 recipients came from suburban schools. Only 1 came from an inner-city school. Those students met our criteria," a woman named Margaret said. She was in her 60s, wearing pearls and an expression of mild concern. "Exactly," Ryan said. "The criteria are the problem. Let me show you what I mean." He pulled up his next slide. "Our criteria require a 3.5 GPA, participation in 2 or more extracurricular activities, and letters of recommendation from teachers. These criteria favor students who already have advantages. We have standards for a reason," Charles said, his tone dismissive. "We can't lower our bar just to achieve diversity." "I'm not asking you to lower the bar," Ryan said, fighting to keep his voice calm. "I'm asking you to recognize that the bar is currently set up to exclude the very students who need help most." He clicked to another slide. "Let me tell you about a student named Deshaun. He's 17. He works 25 hours a week at a fast food restaurant to help his single mother pay rent. He takes care of his 2 younger siblings every afternoon while his mom works her second job. He has a 3.2 GPA despite all this. No extracurriculars because he has no time. His teachers are overwhelmed with class sizes of 35 students and don't have time to write detailed recommendation letters." Ryan looked around the table. "Deshaun doesn't meet our criteria. But is there anyone in this room who thinks he hasn't demonstrated exceptional character and resilience?" The room was silent. "Now let me tell you about Madison," Ryan continued. "She has a 4.0 GPA. She's captain of the debate team, plays violin in the orchestra, and volunteers at her church every Sunday. Her parents are both professionals who can afford SAT tutors and college application coaches. She'll get into a good school regardless of our scholarship. Madison meets all our criteria. Deshawn doesn't, so we give the scholarship to Madison while Deshawn continues to work 25 hours a week and pray he can somehow afford community college. Charles leaned forward. Mr. Reed, I appreciate your passion, but excellence is excellence. If Deshawn can't maintain our standards, perhaps he's not ready for higher education. Ryan felt anger rising but pushed it down. With all due respect, Mr. Bennett, Deshawn is demonstrating more excellence than most students I've ever seen. He's just demonstrating it in ways your criteria don't measure. Your criteria, Charles corrected coldly. No sir, your criteria. These were established long before I arrived. I'm simply pointing out that they're failing to achieve the Foundation's stated mission. Margaret spoke up. Mr. Reed, what specific changes are you proposing? Ryan walked through the new criteria: holistic review process, context-based GPA evaluation, optional recommendations, essay questions about responsibility and resilience, partnerships with high schools in underserved areas to identify students who might not apply on their own. This is all very emotional, Charles said when Ryan finished. But philanthropy requires rigor, not sentiment. We can't just throw money at every hard luck story. I'm not asking you to throw money anywhere, Ryan said, his voice hardening. I'm asking you to think critically about whether your current approach is actually helping people or just making you feel good about yourselves. The room went completely silent. Several board members looked shocked. Eleanor's expression remained neutral, but Ryan thought he saw approval in her eyes. Charles stood abruptly. This is absurd. Mrs. Hayes, I cannot support this direction. Mr. Reed lacks the education and experience to redesign our programs. This entire initiative is a mistake. Sit down, Charles, Eleanor said, her voice like steel. I will not sit down while this security guard insults the work we've done for decades. Charles, Eleanor said, standing to face him. Ryan has identified real problems with real data. If you're more interested in protecting your ego than in actually helping people, then perhaps it's time for you to step down from this board. Charles's face went red. Are you seriously threatening to remove me? I'm seriously suggesting you decide whether you're here to do good or to feel good, Eleanor replied. Those are two very different things. Charles grabbed his briefcase. This is unacceptable. I'm resigning from this board effective immediately. He stormed toward the door, then turned back. Mark my words, this entire initiative will be a disaster. You're making a terrible mistake, Eleanor. He left the door slamming behind him. Two other board members stood. We should probably go as well, one of them said. We share Charles's concerns about this direction. They left more quietly than Charles had, but the message was clear. Eleanor looked at the remaining 5 board members. Anyone else? The room was silent. Good, Eleanor said. Now let's have a real conversation about these proposed changes. For the next hour they discussed Ryan's proposals in detail. Margaret asked thoughtful questions. A man named James pushed back on some points but seemed willing to listen. Gradually, Ryan felt the tide shifting. By the end of the meeting, the board had voted to approve a pilot program using the new scholarship criteria. They would award 20 scholarships under the new system alongside the traditional program, then compare outcomes. As people filed out, Margaret approached Ryan. That took courage, standing up to Charles like that. He's been bullying this board for years. Someone needed to challenge him. After everyone left, Eleanor and Ryan stood alone in the conference room. That was intense, Ryan said, his hands still shaking slightly from adrenaline. You did well, Eleanor said. You spoke truth to power. That's exactly what this foundation needs. I made 3 board members resign. 3 board members who were more interested in maintaining comfortable systems than in actually helping people. We're better off without them. She paused. But Ryan, you should know. Charles Bennett is not the type of man who accepts defeat gracefully. He's going to come after you, after us. He has influence in this city. What can he do? Eleanor's expression was troubled. I don't know yet, but we need to be prepared. That evening Ryan told Mia about his day while they made dinner together. You were very brave, Daddy, Mia said seriously. Like a superhero standing up to bad guys. Ryan laughed despite his exhaustion. I don't know about superhero, baby. You are, Mia insisted. You're helping people who need help. That's what superheroes do. Ryan hugged her tight, drawing strength from her simple faith in him. What he didn't know was that Charles Bennett was already making phone calls, already pulling strings, already setting in motion events that would test Ryan and Eleanor in ways they couldn't imagine. The real battle was just beginning.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.